What are we waiting for?
The full professor. For recognition. Okay, so we will call to order the special board meeting in the West Basin Municipal Water District on Thursday, May 30th. And that we have a determination of the general manager.
Yes, happy to do that. Director Scott Houston, Director Don Deere,
Here.
Director Gloria Gray,
Here.
Director Harold Williams,
Here.
and President Desi Alvarez.
Here. Do we have any public comment?
Mr. President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to make public comment, please indicate so now by raising your virtual hand. And Mr. President, I do not see any request.
Okay. And we have any presentations, so we will move, we don't have anything on the action calendar, so we will move to the information calendar, which is a workshop. So, Mr. General Manager.
Yes, thank you very much, President Alvarez. And this is, as noted on the front page on this packet, page 3. This is our 4th budget workshop. I want to say thank you very much to the Board of Directors for the great dialogue back and forth with staff. I think we are honing in on the materials that we're presenting to you today to enable you to help guide us in our future discussions. Again, our fiscal year does end at the end of June. So we do have a 5th board workshop tentatively scheduled for next Friday. So staff is able to do that. We also have our regularly scheduled June Finance and Administration Committee, where we could also have additional discussion. And then, of course, we have our final board meeting there on the 4th Monday of June. So we'll go ahead and begin.
Okay, so let me interrupt you for a second, please. Hopefully we'll get there today, but if not, we can have one more workshop, and it sounds like if next Friday may not be convenient for everyone, or that, you know, that there's still time for rescheduling something in between now and the next board meeting when we have to approve the budget. One question for clarification, you sent out an email this morning with the revised agenda saying that there was a difference between what is being presented today and what we had previously received. Could you maybe address what particular items so that we know what's in the new versus
Yes.
the old? Not that the old is that old.
No. And let me just, because I want to give Wendy and the entire finance department a lot of credit. In preparation for this meeting, we've actually gone through a few different iterations of the PowerPoint that you're about to see. We did a significant rewrite on Tuesday evening to add a potential option for your consideration. And you'll see that in the presentation, it's a 7.5%. So as we've been presenting some options for you, those were used for illustrative purposes. So you can kind of get a gauge or feel for where we were. So we've always included a 5, a 10, and a 15. We've added a 7.5% rate increase. So you can see exactly what that would look like, what those numbers would be. And in the act of rewriting this presentation to add that, I believe finance identified 4, was it 4 errors or 4 slides?
3 slides, 2 slides basically the definition, you know, and then 1 slide is just copy and paste one number.
So which,
This-
what are the pages that I can just have the old and the new and, I mean, I saw that there's a change. I just wonder what the change is.
So that is,
Right? And I can pull it up fast. My understanding is that slides 23 and 24 had a minor error.
35.
That was 41.
45, the package page 45.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
Yeah, package page 45.
Talking back of the page versus slide.
It's package page 45 here.
And then package page 28.
And which one?
28.
No problem.
28.
Which one is it?
It must be 29. Because you originally said slides 23, 24, and 41. And so the packet page numbers will throw those off.
Must be 29 then. Yeah. No, actually it's 27. I'm sorry. It's
Package
27.
27 change,
27, yes.
package.
27, 28, and 45.
I apologize for the error. If you have the new packet, Director Williams in front of you, then that's the one we're working from. And the updated packet has been excellent. And they were small modifications. And we'll touch on those when we get there.
Yes.
Okay. All right, with that, I apologize. Just wanted.
No.
Change between yesterday and.
Thank you for the clarification. Again, I do want to give Wendy and her team credit for the quick turnaround on this. And then, of course, even the review of the PowerPoint. I'm going to try to move forward for the first half of this presentation myself. We do have West Basin staff, department managers, and program managers available to answer any questions as always. But most of this you've already seen. We're going to highlight some of the changes since our most recent workshop. So if we can turn the page. Obviously, we always begin with West Basin's mission to provide a safe and reliable supply of high quality water to the communities that we serve. Again, this has been the heart of my conversation with all of our retail agencies when we talk about our budgets and proposed rate. Next slide. Today's workshop agenda follows kind of the same pattern as our most recent, but I'll touch on a few differences. We'll touch on the budget workshop schedule again. We'll recap and provide feedback from the May 15th workshop. So all the changes that we've made since the last one. Our fiscal year 24-25 expenses and revenues, we'll run through that. We'll look at the West Basin debt payment summary. Through this process, we've had a great deal of discussion related to West Basin's current debt load and the potential for new debt to fund new projects or pull from reserves. Move from there to the fiscal year 24-25 CIP budget priority projects. This was handled last budget workshop, the CIP projects. There's nothing new there, but we wanted just to remind you of the costs and expenses of that CIP effort. And then that gets us into that conversation about how much money is available for CIP based off of the decisions that are being made by the rate related to the rates. And then an overview of the 10-year CIP spending and CIP funding options. And then last but not least, the fiscal year 24-25 rate increase options and debt coverage. If we can turn the page. So here we are. This is the final of our initial scheduled budget workshops, May 30th. Again, the idea here is to take everything that we've learned over the past or the initial 3 workshops with the board of directors and our customer workshop and try to summarize everything for you today. Again, we do have one tentatively scheduled for next Friday if needed. Next slide. So this will provide an overview of the fiscal year 24-25, all proposed or budget expenses. I wanted to note, if you look at the slide left to right, you can see the categories and broader programs that West Basin funds. You can see that we are currently projected to spend 64.4 million, almost 65, or excuse me, 64.5. This is slightly higher than what we showed you last month. And the reason for this is that this is projected through the end of the fiscal year. And so as we're getting invoices, we have found that in certain areas, we've exceeded what we were projecting to spend based off of some of our incoming invoices. So we're a little bit higher there than we've been showing, but that's based off of the invoices that we received. The next column there is what we adopted last fiscal year. So you can see that we were just over the $73 million adopted last year. So we are well below our projected expenses are well below what we budgeted for the year. You can then see in that third column, our proposed workshop, number 1. This is the outline that we provided at that first workshop. It was just over the $72 million mark. It was 72.3. And since that workshop, we've actually reduced our expenses nearly across the board for a total amount of $3.2 million, $3,234, or $234,864 for a total now proposed budget of $69,129,670. So we have made some significant cuts and reductions. Again, I want to say thank you very much to our executive team, as well as all of the department managers and program managers that have gone line by line through all of their budgets and found reductions that will not impact our overall programs and projects. So if we can turn to the next slide. So one of the things that came about during the second budget workshop from the board of directors was kind of looking at what our projected expenses were when it comes to our projected expenses. So our budgeted versus projected. And at that meeting, it was discussed that it should be anywhere from 5 to 10% of our total projected expenses. And so now looking at our new proposed budget at $69,129,670. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy. I think we're roughly 7.2% above our projected expenses for this year. Does anybody have any questions related to that? Okay, if we can go to the next slide. The next slide. So this is when we talk about those department budget reductions. These next slides highlight all of those, and you can see where we're actually reducing our expenses. So the first one is our recycled water operations and proposed budget. You can see there's a significant reduction in our anticipated chemical costs. You know, part of this is that board approved agreements with the procurement of certain chemicals just the other day. But we're also seeing that because the PV lateral project has not been completed and will not be completed at the start of the fiscal year, we will see a reduction in some of our chemical costs. That'll also impact our total cost for utilities and solids handling, cost of secondary effluent that we would receive from LA. So you can see that we have reductions there across the board: chemicals, contract operations, utilities, facility maintenance, solids management. You can dip down, you see that $1,700 less in secondary effluent. And then you can see a reduction in our overhead allocation. So we received slightly more than $2.6 million reduction in the total cost of our recycled water operations. Next slide. So in looking at our public information and education budget, you can see again, the total reduction here is $279,126. I'm very pleased to say that we've been able to find these reductions, and we feel very confident that we can meet our goals, objectives, and still fall in line with this budget. You can see that most significant, I think, from the programmatic cuts is water harvest. We reduced that by $25,000, and you can see that the total proposed budget there at $158,000. That's a pretty significant reduction from our initial workshop one proposed budget of 183,000. And the reason for that is that last year we were extremely successful as far as soliciting sponsorships to bring in money for that option or for that program. We anticipate doing the exact same thing this year. We've also had a team from our Water Policy and Resources Development really push and try to strategically utilize as much of our MAA funds through Metropolitan Water District to fund this program. And so while we think that the total overall cost of the water harvest will exceed the 158,000, we feel that we're going to be able to backfill that with potential sponsorships. It'll take us some time to get the commitments for, but we're willing to put in the legwork and get that done. You can see also that the water exploration, the school tours, we did reduce that by $10,000. The premise there was that we actually provide kits to our school tours and the water exploration kits. We're actually anticipating an increase in the number of kits that we do. What we did is we cut the increase in half. So there's still more kits, but there's not as many kits as we were looking at when we initially proposed the budget. Then you can see that education, minimal reduction there, and outreach, 29,201. Primarily this is through our MAA funds, trying to utilize as much as we can with our metropolitan funds to outreach all of our efforts as far as our conservation messaging. Again, we don't know what the summer will bring us. If we enter into a significant drought, we may need to come to the board and talk about different options. But again, we feel that we can fall within that line. And then last but not least, the overhead allocation, you can see there's a total reduction of $211,425. That will not be a reduction in staff members. It'll just be kind of a shifting of the overhead from one department to others and kind of realigning where we expend our efforts. Next slide. So water use efficiency and conservation. I do want to say one thing before I get into this item. I want to make it very clear that this is not a reduction in any of West Basin's water use efficiency or conservation efforts. These are reductions that were pulled as far as prioritizing how we utilize our funds. You can see that we actually reduced the grass removal by $185,000 for a total budget now of $500,000. I've mentioned to you in each of the budget workshops where we've talked about grass replacement that as we work with Metropolitan Water District to fund portions of our grass replacement programs, which are primarily funded through our grants, we will come back to the board if we come to a point where that money will be exhausted. We find that the program is extremely successful and we do not want to lose our momentum. So if we start to see that we're getting close to that 500,000 budget, we'll come back to the board for consideration and see if there's an option to shift funds or utilize outside funds to maintain that program. But at this time, we do not anticipate any changes to that program.
So with respect to that, you said at this time we do not anticipate any changes to that. Do we have based on current application, estimate of where we're at?
Yes, so that's an important thing to acknowledge because you can see there on the what would be the third column that last year we budgeted slightly over $1 million. And that's because, as you just mentioned, when you enter into the Met portal to get your rebate program, that money becomes obligated, but ultimately does not get paid out. And you can see here that we're projecting to spend about $450,000 in that program. And so we felt that the 500,000 would be enough to get us through the next fiscal year. And some of those funds are obligated now because, but there's no telling as to whether those projects will be completed. But again, looking at our current burn rate and the 500,000 budgeted, we feel very comfortable.
How many applications do we have in place now? And maybe you can bring that back.
We'll have to check. But I would caution, just like we did last year, where we brought it to your attention immediately. We said we have a lot of applications in the queue. the burn rate is obviously far less than the number of applicants, but we will get that for you as an action item.
Thank you.
And so you can see that there's a small reduction in the rain barrel supply distribution. Again, this will not change the number of rain barrels that we distribute through this program. We will continue to host those events in all 5 divisions. And then last but not least, you can see that there's a slight change in the overhead allocation. Worth noting too, the fire escape program, you can see that we've actually increased that by 2,000. And the Las Virgenes partnership, you can see that went up by $9,200. None of those funds will come from West Basin Municipal Water District. The fire escape program comes from our MAA funds, and $9,200 for the Las Virgenes program, that will come from a integrated regional water management grant. Next slide. So the only 2 changes here, you can see the $2,000 added to the Legislator of the Year award. That is just a reshifting of funds to I think, properly locate where that program is. Traditionally or previously, that the funds for those awards were handled through our Public Information Education Department. And then you can see there's a nearly a $100,000 chip in overhead allocation. And if you look at our current projected expenses, a big piece of that is grants. When we apply for grants, and we have our team from our engineering and operations, as well as our public information, education, and finance team, when we're working on those grants, some significant shifts in overhead because they're dedicated to a water policy effort. So minimal change there. Next slide. So in the information tech, sorry, I myself jumped. On our IT proposed budget, you can see some significant changes all the way down. $115,000 reduction in consultants, $100,000 reduction in temporary labor, the $308,000 software license reduction, a reduction in our telephone expenses by $24,000, and a reduction in our lease expenses of $20,000, a little bit more than $20,000. The budget now falls much closer in line with our current projected expenses. We do know that we have new expenses that will need to take place in this next fiscal year, but we're trying to defer all efforts that we can. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're efficient with our information technology. Again, to stress the importance of this program, West Basin staff, we don't not only work here in the building, but we work everywhere. We work at home, we work in the evenings, we work on the weekends. Having our computers working, having our cell phones available allows us to maintain constant communication and get things done. Unfortunately, we are seeing significant increases when it comes to software licenses. So we are closely tracking each license that we procure and what it would mean for us as far as streamlining our efforts and our workloads. But this is going to be a trend, I think, for the next several years as technology continues to advance. Next slide. So in our technical planning, you can see that last year in the proposed budget, our proposed technical planning budget was a little over $5.2 million. We spent under $1 million. I want to highlight that because I want to make sure that everybody's aware that that didn't diminish the amount of work that we did. We had a lot of great work done in-house. And to highlight one person specifically, our executive manager of engineering operations, Mark Serlian, working with Metropolitan Water District to actually complete, an initial look at taking pure water into our distribution system. So I feel like a lot of work has been done, although we were able to do that without spending much money. You can see here that we're going to maintain that same strategy. From proposed budget workshop number 1, we were slightly over $1.1 million. We've been able to reduce that by $183,500. That is basically just a shift of our effort. You can see there it's a reduction. We're actually splitting the number of bulk chemical storage tanks that we'll assess this year. We're going to do half this year and half next year. Secondly, we're going to prioritize those tanks to see which ones need to be done. So we'll be doing them kind of with a priority order. But you can see that that was able to reduce that from half. And then, of course, our West Basin labor, there's significant reduction there. And then last but not least, I just want to highlight the $150,000 for the climate change plan. That is required as part of our permits and state statute. So we're moving forward with that, knowing that we need to complete that. Next slide. So you can see here our district overhead. In each of the program budgets that I've just ran through, you can see that there have been shifts as far as where we're prioritizing our staff time and dedicating our overhead. But you can see we're just slightly above where our projected expenses are and what our proposed budget was. So we're at 1.15 there for the district overhead. Next slide. So obviously our human resources department, it is a two-woman crew that takes great care of us from top to bottom, bottom to top, and of course our board of directors. You can see that there is a significant, well, a somewhat significant change between our projected expenses and our proposed budget. But I do want to highlight why that is. You can see there that our DEI&A effort, we did continue to budget funds for that. That is now a mandatory training for all West Basin staff, including new staff through the year. So we're going to really broaden that program up. And then there is $50,000 here for the class and comp study. That was not included last year. And so we've discussed that at workshops 2 and 3, but those funds are available here. You can see some slight modified reductions in our recruitment costs. I want to highlight this because you can see that we're proposing to spend about $36,000. We will not stop our effort to outreach our available positions. And I want to say thank you very much to our Human Resources Department because they are doing an excellent job. It was noted yesterday when we were talking about our internship program, the number of applicants that we're getting. That is through a great deal of hard work. But here we are, and we're going to slightly reduce our proposed spending there. You can see some reductions as far as our training and legal expenses, as well as our office administration, and then memberships and our career fair. That career fair was extremely popular. It was a great event there held at El Camino College. We anticipate doing another one next year based off of the success of that. So we anticipate having that program there, but you can see some cuts. Next slide. So our board services, I think that the biggest difference between what our projected expenses are and our proposed budget is that $800,000 election expense. That to me, obviously is required, but when you look at the total cost there, that's the bulk of it. You can also see the $15,000 final adjustment when it comes to the strategic plan and manager discussion. It's worth noting that last year you did budget $30,000 for that effort, the strategic planning effort. All of the proposals that we received were above $45,000. This gets us to that $45,000. We actually pulled that money from a manager strategic planning session, the $15,000. So that's just a shifting of funds, but it does get us to a point where we feel that we'll have the funds available to move forward on the strategic planning effort. Next slide. Last but not least, our groundwater monitoring proposed budget. You can see there, it is slightly more than what our projected expenses are. This is primarily because we have another retail agency, one of our municipalities that is potentially requesting us to provide services. But it's worth noting that this is 100% reimbursable by those retail agencies that we assist. This is a customer service effort that our municipal utilities customers greatly appreciate. So we're going to continue that effort. And those funds are there. You can see that we spent far less than budgeted last year. We anticipate being below budget, but we want to have the funds available to help them, and then we'll be reimbursed for that. Next slide. So these are just some of the proposed budgets that have not changed since our workshop number 1. You can see our DLG building. proposed budget there. And then if you go to our finance and procurement proposed budget, that has not changed either. So again, I do want to say thank you very much to all our department managers and program and project managers. This has been a culmination of a lot of great work, I think, on the internal side, looking at each program and seeing exactly what we need. We feel that those programmatic budgets will put us in a place to meet our objectives and stay within budget. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wendy Nakamura to walk us through now kind of the look of our revenue and how that looks as far as our CIP and potential use of our cash reserves.
Yes, thank you, EJ. Good morning, directors. I'll start on the package page 27. You page package page 27. So page 27, basically, we want to give you guys an overview of what is West Basin's total revenue going to be. This one is calculating based on zero increase on the reliability service charge. So as you can see, the portable service charge, the reliability service charge, currently we're calculating.
Wendy, I apologize. So I'm recognizing the look of this. So our packet pages, if you have the full board packet, is the page number that she's referring to. If you do not have the full packet and you're looking at the very specific slide, we are on slide 23. So if you just have the stapled slides, we're on slide 23. See that in the bottom right hand corner.
Oh, okay, they're on slide number 26.
That's right here, Wendy. This is 23.
23. Huh?
You said that this was one of the slide package page 27, one reflected a change.
Yeah.
I want to see a change between today's presentation and the one we had yesterday. On package page 27.
Oh, I think one he's printed out yesterday, give it to you, that's already been corrected. It's the early morning when we posted online, and then I made a change around noon. So if he give you the package around 5 p.m., that's already corrected.
Does that make sense, Director Roberts?
I hope so.
Yeah, so you might already have the right
If you
package.
received that yesterday at the conclusion of our board meeting, that had already been corrected. Okay, so we are on, sorry for the confusion. We are on slide 23.
We're on slide 23. Okay, cool. So slide number 23, basically, the total revenue currently calculating is based on the reliability survey charge at $275 per acre feet without any increases. As you can see, the first line, 22 million, we calculated based on the estimate potable water sales for next year at 81,800. The recycling water revenue projected at 50 million. Then we have the fixed service charge, which is the public information and the water policy to department expenses. Standby charge, you guys supported passed yesterday, which is $5.7 million. The grant, we will have the next line to break down all the details of $8 million grant. For the fixed payment, we still have several refinery agreement currently going to be ongoing until next year. So these are the total fixed service charge based on the existing agreement what we have. And then investment income is based on currently we have a cash balance of $69 million. And then it's being calculating based on the scale of depending on how much cash we're going to take it out based on to funding the CIP project. The OM reimbursement about $200,000 is currently Torrance Refinery is reimbursed West Basin about $97,000 a month for the OM expenses. So we expecting, there's 2 months, revenue for next year until the current, agreement expires. Groundwater monitoring, this is just reimbursement. We're going to collecting back from the lab services. We're down for the 2 cities. So now please turn to the next page. We're going to take a look at it, the grant. So the grant, we're going to be expecting the PV lateral grant of $2.1 million. We're going to be receiving another PV lateral grant from DWR for about $1.9 million. And then same for PV lateral from Cal Water, expecting $2.5 million, and PV golf course is about $500,000. These 2 grants from Cal Water and PV lateral, we originally already budgeted in this current year. However, due to the delay of the completion of the project, it looks like we're now going to be receiving in this year. So we're going to be rebudgeting to be received for next year.
I want to sum this up. My question. I understand, right, kind of guess why PV golf course wants to wait till everything at the end and give us the money. Why is Cal Water delaying the payment till the end of the project?
That's our current agreement with them.
It's in the agreement. That they
It's in the agreement that at the completion of the project.
Thank you.
And then the rest of 200,000 plus replacement from a and then we are going to receiving about $400,000 grants from Metropolitan DWR. That's for just some of our conservation programs. So that added up about $8 million grants we're expecting to receive next year. Next slide. So this next slide, we just want to give you the director's overview of, as our projected revenue, as the rate increase, as you mentioned, we added the 7.75% yesterday. So basically, as you can see, the more our SC increase, the more available cash will be able to fund the CIP project. I just want to mention that even with the 15% rate increase, our available cash of the CIP is only going to be $13 million. And then our proposed CIP for next year are going to be $29 million. So there's going to be still $16 million. Vice Basin need to be either funded by our cash or the $30 million letter of credit. You guys approved it yesterday.
We just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. When we look at the remaining slides, we're going to be looking at this revenue picture as well as our CIP, the projects that we're contemplating, and then trying to figure out exactly how much cash we're going to have available through our rates, our cash on hand, and our line of credit. And it's going to be a blend of those as far as how we pay for these, and that ultimately is going to be a decision made by the board of directors. And so when we talk about a rate increase, it ultimately comes down to how much you want to make available to our CIP.
Okay, next slide, please. I think we're going to be on one more. Okay, so this slide, basically, we laid out all our existing debt coverage for next year and until 2042. So the first one basically is our existing loans, existing debt we issued, we have three outstanding, 2016, 2021, 2022. So that's the major one we need to pay for the existing, bond we issued is 20.7 million for next year. And then, for last year, we receiving the 3.6 million, 1% loan from the state of California. And then those being calculated as, for next year, we're going to pay the 166,000. And then in the next few months, we're going to be expecting additional $12 million also for the reimbursement of the Carson Phase 2 project at 1%. We're projecting next year, we're going to pay about $547,000 for that. We put it out the $3.9 million PV lateral in there. However, due to the delay of project, we're not expecting this loan to be received until 2026. And then the last one is the letter of credit, which is I mentioned at yesterday's meeting. The $130,000 basically is the cost to maintain the line open. And it depends on, the project, CIP, what do we need for next year? Any additional million we pull from the 30 million line is about. Next slide. So this slide is,
Interrupt you for just a second.
yes,
I apologize. That slide that you just had up. Existing debt is really not the existing principal, the existing debt payment. The second column.
go back to one
that
more.
says the package page 31.
Yeah,
slide
yes.
27
Uh-huh.
says existing debt. That's existing debt payment.
Yeah, it is existing debt payment. Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's not it's not our total outstanding debt. That's two different debt. This is the existing debt. Should we say maybe, I should change it to like current year payment. Right, current year payment. Okay. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, so for this slide, basically, I just want to give the directors information about our outstanding revenue bond. What is the principal, what is the interest payment for next year until 2042.
So just for clarification on this, if we incurred no net new debt, which for debt extensions, you would pay off all our debt by 42,
Correct.
and our existing bonded indebtedness is 174 million.
That's the principal that had 174, correct,
So that's bonded indebted.
correct.
And then in addition to that, okay, go ahead.
All right, okay, next page. So this page is, it is the $3.6 million, 1% loan we received from the state of California. And then we just copied this page from the loan document we're receiving from the state of California.
I have a question just for, so of this loan from the state of California, we have actually drawn only 3.6 million.
So is, the state of California sent us a check
So 3.6.
for 3.6. Actually, they sent us a one check for 7.2, and then they told us 50% of the check is for the grant. And then 50% of check is for the loan. So they put the 7.2 million in one check and tell us do your own math right there.
But the total loan that we are gonna get is 12 million. Or
Yes, the total we are applying is the 15.7 million. If you see the little one on the top, it says
okay,
total amount, right?
so we're gonna borrow 15.7 million,
Uh-huh.
of which we've already drawn down 3.6 million.
Correct.
And of which remaining, we should draw down another 12 million, but we have not drawn it down yet.
We haven't received yet. That's coming for next couple months, we hope.
Okay, so that will be, when it comes in, will be that new money that we haven't shown yet in the previous slide.
We will show in a later slide. When we're receiving that, the 12 million, additional 12 million, you'll,
Additional income coming in.
correct. That will help for the construction next year.
Going back then to the take, on package page 31,
Uh-huh.
when you're showing the different payments to phase two loan, which payment in here reflects the payment on that potential $12 million? Or is it reflected in?
Well, it reflected in there is the third column, package page 31.
Mhm.
That's which is the 12 million we're expecting to receive. And then,
And you just make sure you use the slide number.
oh, okay. So then the slide number is the 27.
Find the new columns.
Yeah, well,
Package page.
package 31, slide 27.
31. So that would be column number 4.
No, in column number 3,
Is the 3.6?
oh, you're right. Column number 4 is the 12 million we're
Okay,
expecting,
so when,
half a million.
so we are in your debt payment.
Hmm.
We're representing our total debt payment. You are including the receipt of the $12 million.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Okay, so I think we're going to move down to. Next slide. We already explained this. So the next slide is, this one is for the $3 million PV lateral. And then at the interest rate of 0.55 for 20 years. This is also a copy from agreement with state of California, but this may change. It depends on when are we receiving, when are we actually the date or month we're going to receiving the fund. As you can see, originally they start date is July 2025, but we're expecting to receiving this earlier than that.
Okay, so going back again to package page 31 or slide 27 again, where is that payment shown in that table? Or it is not shown?
It showed on column number 5.
Okay, so that is,
The 206,457.
right, so that's the state revolving loan.
Yes.
Okay, keep going, sorry.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so this next slide is the same thing for PV lateral. However, there's two different kind of loans at the same rate. One is the 3 million, one is the 900. And then this is just two different table how to calculating these two loans. And then the entire cost we're going to be paying for included in the package page 31, column number 5.
That's the 175 plus the 52.
Yeah. Okay, we're good. Okay, next slide. So this slide is the debt payment by each fiscal year. This is based on the total how cash payment we're going to pay based on the schedule. We keep on going back reference to your package page 31. As you can see, currently next year, we're going to pay about total over 20 million. But then, as the time goes on until 2042, each year we're only going to pay 1.5 million. That as the projection of if we are not issue more debt.
Assuming we do not issue more debt.
Correct.
So question on that. In going back to package page 31, which is slide 27,
Okay.
in year 31, 32, our debt payment will be 18,379,000.
Yes,
We'll lose the standby charge.
yes,
So we will lose $7 million in revenue.
all right,
We will have to make up that revenue something.
yes. So that's has been addressed in the later slide about how the revenue decreased by 7 million and then what is the outcome of financially. There's a later slide, we had mentioned that. Okay, so next slide. So that was conclude all the debt, our outstanding debt, our current and the ongoing payment. So this slide, what we want to bring back to the board, we just want to mention that at our last budget meeting, we had mentioned we have a CIP challenges, and then we also have opportunities, right? So the challenges is basically we have a pretty poor water quality, and then our facility is aging. Some major treatment plant assets need to be replaced, like the slide project we talked about yesterday. There's unexpected shutting down, probably sometimes very frequent, that happens a couple times a month. Also, we need to be positioned our today's recycling water operation to thinking about how to change for the changes with the Southern California other water program. The opportunity including some of our recycling water agreement will be renewed next year. The cost of service is nearly completed. We also going to be issue a RFP for our OM operator. We also already planning to team up with Metropolitan, LADWP, and WRD for future projects. Next slide. So the next slide, I think for the last CIP meeting, Barb had already given pretty detailed about what is our current project, CIP project for next year. So next slide, please. So for some of the ongoing next year CIP project, as you can see, West Basin needs to fund is $28 million. Next slide, please.
Hold on, can you go back to? Next slide, please.
Is in your package, page 40.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is exactly the same slide when last time we came to the board for the budget CIP meeting.
This is from workshop 3.
So in here we have. So if I look at 39 and 40, 40 a continuation of 39. Package page 39 and 40.
Oh, 39, uh-huh.
So far, where we are with these projects, it appears that it's moving forward. It's a solid handling improving project. Package page 39,
Uh-huh.
for the DCF. The others are still under consideration for, I don't remember. And so that's a question. If we have approved them, we'll move forward with them.
For the,
I think we did with the.
yeah, I was just gonna say the Title 22 filter. You can see that the bottom 2 on this slide. I believe that just reflects staff time. As far as the R&R projects, you're familiar with all the new infrastructure items, the phosphorus recycled. Mills Park, we do have some staff time. North Gardena, we do have staff time. You're aware that we have significant grants and federal funding for that, but we're not spending any money on those projects. Those projects don't have a green light yet. And then, of course, you're familiar with the South Bay 405 auxiliary lanes project. If you turn the page as it continues. Again, you can see some staff time there for the ECL bulk chemical storage. You can see the fire protection system improvement. This is an ongoing effort. You're aware of that. We have significant issues there with our fire protection system. So there are investments being made there. You can see the Chevron nitrified bulk chemical storage. I've had a chance to discuss this with, I think, most of you individually, but this is an expense that is necessary. However, we anticipate that the Chevron nitrified agreement will expire in September of 2024, so just a few months away. And we anticipate entering into a new agreement with Chevron for that service. And we anticipate that they'll be paying for this program and project. And similarly, when you get to the JMM projects, the site improvement, the bulk chemical storage, we've talked about the site improvements there with the JMM expansion. So that's the funding there. Ultimately, the board would have to approve that. And then there's a little over $500,000 for the bulk chemical storage. Again, the agreement with the refinery there expires in January of 2025. And so we would expect to see additional revenue to fund those projects, but the board would ultimately have to say as to whether to move forward with those efforts.
And that next slide. This one is also exactly the same information we provided at the last budget workshop. Is there's other CIP project, for you to consider. And that one is for West Basin total cost, which is on the next slide. it's just going to be West Basin internal cost of $1 million, 1.093. That's on your package, page 42. Can we keep going? Yes. Okay, so let's talk about next slide. We're going to talk about the future years of CIP funding option. We have providing the recycling water agreement. And as you can see, you know, we have a new, we expecting some new or extended agreement, and then we put the what year we expecting this to happen on the slide.
For the board, we feel that this is clearly an opportunity. We've been in conversations and negotiations with all of our refineries, but also the water replenishment district, as well as the city of Los Angeles. As we look at the expiration date of these agreements, we anticipate a new revenue coming from those agreements, but we wanted to highlight that. And if we want to turn to the next slide, I just want to jump in as we introduce this next slide. This is a new slide. This is something that what we're trying to do. I'm going to walk you through it. I hope I do it justice, but Wendy can correct me if I'm wrong. What the purpose of today's workshop was, at the conclusion of workshop 3, was to talk a little bit about our debt payments, and how we were going to fund future CIP. And so the next slides, as we progress through the rest of this presentation, are hopefully going to give you an idea of what funds are available to fund capital improvement projects as we move forward. Again, the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility produces a significant amount of water to our service area, but we also have contractual obligations to some of our customers, and we need to meet those obligations. Otherwise, we're putting ourselves in liability. So some of the projects that Director Alvarez just mentioned, when you talk about the solids handling as well as the DCS, you look at those and we understand kind of where we're going to be as far as our spending goes over the next 2 years. We also know that we have a little bit of an unforeseeable future when it comes to the city of Los Angeles and Pure Water. So we're kind of looking at this now from a 2-year perspective. I don't want to put words in the mouth of the board or, of course, the board president, but the question as to whether we want to utilize debt to fund these projects is a question that the board must consider. And so what you see before you right here is a look at all of the different options before you, the 5, the 7.5, the 10, and the 15%, and what it would do for the amount of funds that would generate for CIP, and or pulling money from our cash reserves. And you'll see in a future slide, we'll talk a little bit about our credit rating and how that can be impacted by a reduction or significant reduction in our cash on hand. But what you can see here is a 2-year window for each funding option. So if you can bear with me, I'll walk you through. And my wife says I'm colorblind. I don't feel like I am, but to me, this is green. I'm going to call it green. And you can see there that it's a 5% look at if the board were to adopt a 5% rate increase this year and next year. You can see that our beginning cash is at $69 million now. You would see that we would generate a net revenue of slightly more than $32 million. You can see our debt payment that Wendy just went through, and our state loan, of course. And then you can see what our total CIP cost is, and that's at $29.1 million. And so ultimately, we would have funds available, and we would have to pull cash out to fund that effort. And you can see that would reduce us this fiscal year down to that $62.7 million. And then you can see that same cycle in the next fiscal year. And I would, not to hark back to the past, but this was a part of our budget discussion last year. You'll remember that our CFO at the time and executive manager, Margaret Boja, said that we have some significant issues as far as our revenue goes, conservation impacting our sales, and the reduction in our standby charge. And she mentioned at that time that the rate increase that we did last year would impact how much money we would have available for CIP in future years. So we felt that this slide will walk you through that and give you a glimpse. You can see in the next grouping there, on the screen it looks yellow, but on the written page, I think it looks a little bit orange. And you can see that again, with a 7.5% rate increase for those 2 years, you can see that ultimately we'd be getting down to that $52.3 million cash reserve at the end of that 2-year cycle. And again, I think Wendy will touch on this in a little bit. 49 million is kind of our floor, if you will. In order to not impact or potentially impact our credit rating, we would recommend that we stay above the $49 million cash on hand level. And so then you can see the 10% in the next grouping there, and then ultimately the 15%.
So on this one, and thank you for including this slide, and I think it's probably the whole presentation, kind of a good summary. And what this slide is showing us is that with the respective rate increases of 5, 7.5, 10, 15%, if we borrow no additional monies, just with what's already projected and we've already agreed to borrow from the state, and we've already shown that in our debt payment schedule, we would be able to fund the current projects, which includes the solids handling and the DCS improvements. And we would have our cash balances in all cases would end up being about $50 million, even though in some cases we draw down, actually, almost all the cases, it draws down some of the existing reserves. So between reserves and what we have, in each of those respective rate increases, we will always have more than $50 million in reserves, assuming we don't spend money otherwise.
And I would just add one thing to that. When you say we will always for the next 2 years.
Right, and that's how we will for the next 2 years, and we can revisit, and we'll revisit this next year and have a 2-year projection at that time, et cetera. Agreed. We are looking at 25 and 26. Next year, we'll look at 26 and 27, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, but worth to mention though, our current credit rating is AA minus. To stay within AA minus, the minimum requirement of cash balance is 49 million.
Right.
The height is 81 million. So,
I understand. Okay, I'm just saying, you said 49 is the minimum. And I'm pointing out that we would be at 50 million. Okay, above. That's all I'm pointing out. We have differences of opinions as to how much cash you have to have in reserve. Okay? But this is probably the most critical table, so thank you for presenting the information this way, because it does give us the ability to move forward with certain projects that staff believes are very important. And shows us where we are at the end of the day, or at the end of the budget year, in terms of cash on hand. So thank you for that. And I think for the board's consideration, there's obviously going to be in future slides what that means in terms of the actual cost of water that our customers will be paying. But we need to start thinking, do we support a 5%, a 7.5%, a 10, or a 15? and you'll see what that means in terms of here's what your customers are gonna pay for.
And that is
Come
correct.
back And say, you know, I'm comfortable with 5 or not. And the other thing that, and just expressing my opinion on this, I still think that we can probably do better in our expenditures and reduce our expenditures further. But that means that we would have to make some more decisions on items to cut.
So I'll stop there in case, I recognize that this slide, and I thank President Alvarez for the compliment. What we're trying to do is walk you through these options and show you the implications of each of the decisions when we talk about our rates. And as Wendy said, and I think Director Alvarez agreed, you know, our minimum cash on hand would be $49 million, but we know that that's at the very low end. And we'll talk about our credit rating because I know that that is reflective of our agency as a whole. But if there's any questions here related to the 2-year outlook, please let me know, and otherwise we'll move on. Okay. Wendy, why don't you?
Okay, so the next slide. So this next slide basically, as we discussed at the last CIP budget meeting, right, we had providing, you know, the projected CIP cost, what's going to happen to the next 5 years. And then if you recall in the last budget meeting, the CIP meeting, we mentioned that total CIP we're planning to do in 2026 is going to be about 40 million. And then the year after that, on 27, we're going to do 33 million. And then 35 million, 25 million. Until 2034, we're going to do 16 million. So that is just based on our projected CIP. So this graph we developed is based on the projected CIP total. If we're not borrowing any money, just using what we have right now, that this graph is going to show you that after perhaps the fiscal year 26, then we're not going to meet that $49 million minimum.
So first time I've seen this slide, but I understand the slide very. At the end of the day, with this slide, it is showing that we're gonna have very low or smaller reserve. But this assumes that we're going to be spending on a CIP that has not been approved. If we go back to the previous slide that we talked about, it said if we fund the projects that need to be funded today, not everything in the wish list, but to fund the projects that we need to fund today, it will be at 50 million. So when we show this graph, we're assuming a CIP that we may or may not agree on, and we may or may not need, depending on several things that we're waiting to hear about. We won't know until the end of the year or next year. So when we talk about reserves, and when we talk about our drawing our reserves below 50 million, let's be honest that when we see this, this is based on from what I will call, and in my opinion, a make-believe scenario that may or may never come to pass. What we are looking to do and what we need to do from staff's point of view, those projects will be at 50 million. This is just based on a future scenario CIP that may or may not come to pass.
Yeah, this is developed based on the staff recommendation.
That may or may
Wendy,
not. So right now,
real quick, I completely agree with you, but I want to put this in context. On the previous slide, I mentioned that 49 to $50 million would always be above that $50 million for the next 2 years, is what we both agreed on. And if you kind of draw a line there at that those first 2 years, you can see that we're looking pretty good if we were to utilize our reserves for those next 2 years. I agree with President Alvarez in relation to the 10-year outlook of CIP. I do believe, and it's funded in this budget, that the board should meet to work on a strategic plan that outlines our goals and objectives of the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility and West Basin's water recycling efforts. But I think that the projections that you're seeing here is that absent that change in vision and basically goals of, as far as our program goes, the projected numbers that you see in CIP is maintaining the ECL for the future. And so that basically is the only vision and the only strategic plan that we have. And staff has done a great job, I think, of identifying the projects that would maintain the system with the water quality that we're receiving and to meet our contractual obligations. And as President Alvarez said, we don't necessarily know what the future holds, but we do know a few things. We do know that our contractual relationship with the city of Los Angeles will expire in 2026. And I think we all agree that they will not turn off the water in 2026. So we know that for the foreseeable future, we're going to be continuing to recycle water. Now, what our goals and objectives are when it comes to our water recycling efforts, that will change the outlook of this. And so I've had conversations with the team. They know how I feel about projecting out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years out when we may shift kind of our objectives and our goals when it comes to our program. But these are the numbers that we have to meet our obligations. And so we can't just simply ignore it. What we can say is that the decision that will be made today and of course next year and future years will impact how much money we have available for CIP and for our needs at Edward C. Little. So we're not saying anything different. I want you to know that I do agree with you. I just think that we need to put it in some sort of context so we understand kind of the ramifications. So.
But within that context, let's also understand that we really are in no position to make any future decisions that are long-term with long-term implications until we have some indication of where the city of LA is going to be, and we understand that that's not going to be until the end of this year. And that there also are potential ramifications depending on what Metropolitan does with pure water that will impact all of this. So it is premature. I mean, it's fine to say if we have this scenario, but right now, and what we're looking at today is here are the critical investments that staff feels need to be made. And if we make them and we do not incur any additional debt, we will be at 50 million or above, depending on what rate we want to set for the next, for those projects. And then after that, whatever decisions have to be made, and we won't be in a position to make them really until after the end of this year.
Understood.
Okay, next slide. So this slide, we just want to providing the information to the board about one rating agency, how they rate your, how they providing the score to West Basin. West Basin current rating is AA minus. So that is sort of in the middle of the slide, the AA and then the A, right? So actually, if you can see, for last year, our debt coverage is 1.36. We're actually, if we consider our AA, we're actually below the 1.4. So the debt coverage is basically calculated based on the net revenue and then divided by your total debt payment, right? So the more revenue you're going to be earned each single year, that's going to helping to increase your debt coverage number. And then again, that is being determined by what a percentage rate increase you will decide it this fiscal year.
So when you say we'll be below the 1.4, the range is 1 point, depending on which one you want to take of the rating agency. But it's between 1.2 and 1.4, or 1.25 and 1.7.
If you look at the next one, SP Global, that's one actually reading West Basin. The one SP Global, the first one on the top is Moody, and then the next box is the SP Global.
Right.
Yeah, so that one very strong, and strong is, it's like,
1.2 to 1.4.
but that's the A. We're like above the A. We're like between AA and A, so we're actually supposed to be above the A. You're looking at the A box.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's A is lower than the AA minus for our current rating.
Okay.
Like EJ mentioned, credit rating,
Credit to grade inflation.
let,
Okay,
yeah, so credit rating is a kind of a reputation of the district as well. You don't want people to say, your credit rating continue to decline, and then your bond basically is a junk bond, right?
we will never have a junk bond rating. If we had no money in the bank, and we really wanted to go out into the market and borrow money, we would be able to borrow money. We'd be able to borrow money at a very competitive rate, because the demographics of this agency is very strong, and that's the reality. I understand all of these other things, but the reality is we could have zero in the bank, and we went out to borrow money, we could borrow money at a very competitive rate, and we would have lenders willing to come in and do that.
All right, next slide. So this next slide, we just, like Eric always, you keep on mentioning about, there are future projected the CIP project which board has not been approved. So, the next few slide, we just want to show the board, like, based on the 5% increase per year on this slide, we're going to be having some net revenue, and then we already know what our debt payment going to be from now until fiscal year 2040. And then we already know what kind of state loan we're going to get in, right? And then based on that information, we're calculating what is the dollar going to be available for the CIP project. Like, for example, with a 5 years increase for FY 2025, we're going to be having net revenue of $32 million. And then we're going to pay off of that $21 million. And then we're going to receiving additional cash from the state of California for $12 million. Then with all these three conditions we mentioned, that means we're going to have a $22 million cash for CIP. But like I mentioned, our CIP next year projected 29 million. So we're still short of 7 million right here. And then, as you can see, I did the projected from FY 31, which is the year we're going to be lose our standby charges, right? So as you can see, I projected the net revenue from fiscal year 30 is 24 million, and then down 7 million to 31 will become the 17 million. And if we're not borrowing any money, well, basically for fiscal year 31, we have a negative cash. We're not able to do any construction. No cash available for construction.
Any other comments besides me? Good. I will tell you that all of these scenarios are scenarios that are based on assumptions but non-factual. We go back to that one earlier
2 years. The 2 years.
And shows this is what we need to do now and in the next 2 years. And if we do that, then that our cash position will be over 50 million. What we're gonna do after 26, we don't know. There are too many unknowns right now. We won't really be in a position to know till after the end of this year. So to make decisions based on these assumptions, I myself don't, I'm not gonna go there. I think that we do need to look at what we need right now to keep over the next 2 years. And then once we know where the city of Los Angeles is or metropolitan is, then we can make
Yeah,
a real decision and figure out how we're gonna pay for it.
yeah. But then we
Mhm.
develop in this slide, basically, we just want to show you, say, without borrow any money, without even thinking about how much is the CIP going to be. We just say whatever the actual cash we have for that particular year, we're going to be using that for CIP. But that is the condition we try to demonstrate right here.
Yeah, Director Alvarez, I just mentioned, I agree with you about understanding the future. But I do find that these slides are helpful to me. And the reason for that is because when I think about the strategic plan and kind of looking at the future of West Basin, I think about scenarios. And on the top of my head, I think of scenarios. The scenario where LA Bureau of Sanitation produces an MBR facility within a reasonable amount of time. I think about the city of Los Angeles, and that could reduce our costs, right? I think about the city of Los Angeles, if they're not able to produce that MBR facility, extending our agreement and us needing to continue to utilize Edward C. Little. And I look at these numbers and I say, okay, am I going to be able to maintain and operate the facility to meet our contractual obligations, given this is the amount of money we have available for CIP? I think about the potential partnership with Metropolitan Water District and the Pure Water Project, where we would need to introduce that water into our system, perhaps that phased approach, and an effort to maximize the amount of pure water that we receive. And I think about all the improvements that we would need in our distribution system, and I see some savings, and then I see some significant expenses. And then again, I look to see what we would have available for CIP, and quite frankly, I look in that 2031, 2032 area, because that's, if you take the best case scenario of Metropolitan Water District, they would say their phase one would produce by 2028. And I know we've had some conversations about whether that's feasible or not. And then I look at that, the far end of their phase one is 2032. And so you can see here that we'll actually be in the negative because of the standby charge issues. And of course, how much money we'd have for CIP there. So I do find that these are helpful in that regard, but I do agree with Director Alvarez that we don't yet know the future, but we need to look at those scenarios and what is likely to happen. And I can promise you this, the one thing that we do know that will happen is that we'll continue to get wastewater, treated wastewater from the city of Los Angeles for the foreseeable future. We will be recycling water beyond 2026.
Okay, so where we are is that we are going to have, at some point, a decision to make as to what we want to be doing in the coming years, when we have information available as to what those options are before us. Today, we do not have that information, but today we do know that we need to commit to a couple of projects. And those are critical projects. You guys have mentioned that over and over again. So the board is going to support those projects. And given that, if we go back to package page 45, we can afford to do those projects today.
Correct.
Okay, then we need to come back. And this today meeting for the next 2 years. And we'll be in a pretty comfortable position. Then we can come back once we know better what our alternatives are. And I think you had a wish list, I have a wish list, and I don't know whose wish list is going to prevail. But I foresee a different operation potentially for NC Little. And there's actually options on that, if what our other options are. So we can't have that discussion until those facts are before us, and that will be at the end of the year.
I completely agree. I think that from my perspective, we're just trying to show you that the actions of today impact our opportunities down the road.
Then another question occurred to me, when you did those 10 years projections, like at 10%, you also, is that assuming a 10% increase in expenditures also?
No, actually, the 10% is only based on the 10% increase of reliability service charge. So every 5% the reliability service charge increase only bring in West Basin about $1.5 million.
What expenditures do you, how do you expect, in you're getting to that bottom line number when you deduct from the revenue for the expenditure? What's the rate of growth of the expenditure?
I expecting, like, for example, for the expenses and revenue, they're going to be increased at the same speed.
So we're gonna increase our expenditures at 10% a year.
That expenditure actually is being locked in right now as what currently the expenses is going to be. Yeah.
You're projecting out for 10 years.
Yeah.
You're projecting out that the revenues are going to increase at 10% for 10 years.
Mhm.
So the expenditures are going to increase at 10% for 10 years also?
I
Because
think,
they are what they are, they will be what they will be at the end of this process. And then the 10-year projection assumes what the expenditure, you're assuming the same interest rate
no,
increase.
what I'm assuming is, West Basin is going to be doing exactly the same business year by year from now for the next 10 years. We're going to be selling the exactly potable water, recycling water, and then we're still expecting to sell 81,000 acre feet per year for the next 10 years. That is how I project
That's
it.
your revenue,
Mhm.
your expenditure.
So I projecting the net, the expenses.
No,
and the
the
revenue.
net is the difference between revenue and expenditure.
Mhm.
So what is the rate of growth of expenditure?
Well, like you can say, if we can go back to our total revenue, that slide, I can explain. So,
It's a very simple question.
Director, I think I can jump in on that, that the way the model is based and staff understands that projecting out 10 years based on today's assumptions that we have before us is not necessarily going to be accurate in 10 years, but it is the information we have today. To answer your question specifically, the way that Wendy has presented this is essentially those expenditures cancel out the revenue increase for that portion, right? So in the 7.5% increase, as an example, the assumption presented in the table is that if total revenue went up 7.5%, so too does total expenditures, and then the net itself is that
So
7%.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward answer. Thank you very much for the answer. So it may be that we can increase revenue at 7.5%, but our expenditures may only go up by 5%.
That's correct.
Because we have control over expenditures also, depending on what programs other than capital we want to fund.
Absolutely. And
It's like, today we can make a decision to approve the budget as we just went through with all of those expenditures that was presented, or we can say we want a budget that even reduces those expenditures further. And if we did that, we'd have more money available. Or we can say, I want to add some expenditures that aren't in there and approve a bigger budget than we presented today. So I think it's very important to note that it may happen, but I don't see us necessarily wanting to project that we're gonna be increasing our expenditures at 10% rate every year. So that's the other kind of issue that when you look at that, it'd be nice to say, well, if we had revenues increasing at 10% every year and our expenditures are only gonna increase 5% a year, then we're actually, those curves would all shift up.
Director or Chair Alvarez, I would add that, staff fully understands that these are simplified models, right? We do not expect that or suggesting that if you make decisions today, that any of these trends are gonna become reality in 10 years, right? There are a number of variables that are gonna change and shift and have decisions from the board between now and then, and we understand that. But I think it's staff's job is to arm you with the trends that could happen based on your decisions today, and that's all this information is for.
That is all, but it would have been nice, I mean, we've now discussed it and you've agreed that that is based on expenditures increasing at the same rate as revenue, and the two may not be the same. And therefore, those curves all shift. It would be nice to have that right at the beginning. This assuming not only revenues increasing at 10% or 15% or 5%, whichever scenario you want to look at, but expenditures are increasing at the same, which may or may not be the case.
Correct, and it could go the other way as well, right?
Yeah.
They could, I mean, and so it's nice to just, I had not seen that before, and I'm looking at it and go, okay, but this is biased in one direction.
Well, I would just, it is not our intent to be biased in any direction. We're utilizing the best information that we have. Yeah. Well, again, I think these are here for illustrative purposes alone. You can kind of see what the trend is as far as the long term. And I think that the idea here is that, as you would point out, that looking at that 2-year window, it will have an impact on the future. But if we focus in on this year, I think we'll get to next year. We'll continue to have these difficult discussions and decisions. But I think that this year will be a great opportunity for us to make some headway. So Wendy, why don't you, I know, the time, it's roughly, well, it's 11:45. Let's get into unless you have further questions.
What I'd like to do is, can you go to package page 55?
Or 55, yeah.
Okay, so you want to walk us through that?
Oh, yes. Okay, so package page,
It kind of summarizes what the rates are going to be depending on what decisions are being made.
correct. So, the package page 55 and the slide number 51. So there's 5 options currently. We have 0%, 5%, 7.5, 10%, 15, right? So then, if you look at the first half, which is since Metropolitan's potable water rate going to be adjusting every year in January 1. So we're actually just also follow the pattern of how Metropolitan adjusting the water rate, right? So to projecting West Basin, what West Basin's rate going to be, right? So we start with the column number 3, increase 5%. From the current rate of West Basin 275, we're increased to 289, right? So, the tier 1 rate will be the 1694. And then until we increase 15% for the first half year, our tier 1 rate will be the 1721. So our current rate is 1677. So it's not that much increase, $50. And then down to starting January to June, the second half of the year, The big jump in the tier one rate, that is have nothing to do with West Basin. As you can see, Metropolitan jumped the tier one rate from 1,256 all the way to 1,395. And then they also increased the RTS from the $149 per acre fee to 201. So those rate increase have nothing to do with Basin. Once again, our rate increase is very minimal for 5%, 7% to 15%. And then how we calculating the last box? Basically, we're just using, for example, we are looking at no rate increase for West Basin reliability service charge, right? So the tier one rate going to be January 1, 2025 is going to be 1871. And then if we're using that to minus our current rate is the 1677, that's considered 11% for 11.6% increase, right? So adding on West Basin 5%, 75%, 10%, 15%, even West Basin increase 15%, the overall increase of the rate is only going to be 14%.
Thank you. So I think that our decision today is really to give you some feedback as to where we feel comfortable in terms of rate increases. And I'm gonna flip back and forth between package page 45 and package page 55, which is, I forget what slide, so those are.
$45 is that 2 years. The 2 years of CIP projection, cash projection, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Page 41.
That's your package page 45, I think you mentioned.
Package page 45, slide 41.
Yeah.
And then package page 55 is slide
51.
51. So I don't know where the board is, but you might want to think about what you're comfortable with. If we do nothing and not increase our rates, just the fact that with passing through Metropolitan's rates, our rate our effective rate that we'll be charging when that comes through at the beginning of 25 will be 11%, 11.6% increase. And then it goes up from there. So for just discussion purposes, I am comfortable, I'm not comfortable with any increases, to be honest with you, but I could support a 5% increase in our rates. And a 5% increase will still fund all the critical projects that are needed for the next couple of years. And will reflect a net increase in our tier one rate for our customers of 12.4% at the beginning of 25, which is really what we're effectively dealing with here. We need to pass, we have no choice but to absorb the mesh quality increases. They're there, and we're gonna be paying them one way or another. So I'm comfortable with option 2. I don't know where the rest of the board is, but I would ask if anybody has any opinions, because I think staff does need some direction so we can come back and try to wrap up this budget.
Is option 2 enough? My question. I'm really concerned.
Well, you have to go back to package page or slide 51 and slide 41. Slide 41, the green column corresponds to the third column in slide 51. So that green column there is a 5% increase. That is And it shows in here in the little red, boxes. They show you what the increases are on slide 51 or package page 55. I don't know what yours is. I got package page here, so I go back and forth. If you got slide, look at slide 51.
The one that's up now.
No, that's, slide 41.
Oh, yeah, 51 is one with all the red squares.
Yeah, so slide 51, if you look at, that would be the third column, that's a 5% increase in our rate. And if we increase our rates by 5%, and then we have to pass through or absorb, the metropolitan water rate, the net price for tier one water effective January 1 will be 1885. And that's a 12.4% from where we are today, increase. Most of that comes from Met. You know, our increasing our rates by 5% only changes the increase that we need to pass through by 0.8%. So if we can live with the 5% and the 5% shows we can fund the critical projects that need to be funded. And we still have a fairly healthy reserve of over $50 million.
So you're advocating the 5% increase.
That's what I can support, but I'm asking because we need to give the staff. some
Yeah, we need to
direction.
get a consensus from
Yeah.
the board, yeah. I can support that, yes. I'm just wondering if that was enough, so.
I think it is, but you know, I don't want to put
Well-
those in anybody's.
ERP hours, I also want to
Yeah.
refer to the package page number 10. The FY 24-50 proposed expenses. Like EJ mentioned earlier, right? So our current year projection, expenses is going to be 64 million. And then for next year, even though we've been cutting already 3 million down, right now, our projection for next year is going to be 69 million. But that is 7.2%, have to be 70.2% higher than the current year. So my response to your recommendation, 5% is not enough.
Well,
Yeah,
then which one of your figures here is wrong? Because if the presentation that you made is correct,
Kind of blends.
you know, I look at slide 41. And slide 41 tells that for the next 2 years, and this is the scenario at 5%. And we went back through all of these assumptions that were at the beginning. So the assumption is that we're gonna increase our our expenditures by some amount for next year, and that's embedded in here. Okay, it didn't say otherwise. So I'm looking at these two tables. They're the two most critical tables in this presentation in terms of my having to make a decision. And I'm looking at them and go, and I prefer to do zero rate increase. That's my preference. But I understand looking at everything and looking at the future. I don't want to keep kicking the can down the road, and I understand that we're gonna have to deal with some other significant increases, et cetera. So what's a more practical decision to make it easier for everybody? And so I said 5% is something I can support. That's my decision. I'm not speaking for the whole board. I'm speaking for myself. But I'm basing it on the fact that you presented actual numbers and real numbers in slide 41 and slide 51.
Well, I'm gonna ask my other colleagues, Gloria and Harold, how about 7.5? That sounds like a more reasonable figure. Staff is presenting. You and Harold.
yes, I appreciate that. I look at it like this. You know, we have our staff who we depend on more so than one board member to guide us into what we should be doing. Now, I know that for many years, engineers have a tendency not to want to have any increases. And we go along and we say, no increase, no increase, no increase, no increase. And then we did that, and here we are today, and the whole water business is in the same boat, right? That we need to raise our rates because we can't fool, I don't know where we're, anyway. I would look at the higher rate of increase because this opportunity, it is an opportunity to get the rates more where they should be and not have the ratepayer thinking that they can get free water, you might say. So I would definitely look at taking this opportunity to raise the rates a little bit now than later on trying to go higher when the program, or not program, but the ratepayer has not seen any rate increases. So then we have to raise our rates, and I say, oh my God. Then West Basin looks like the bad guy. So I would look at raising, if there's an opportunity to get the rates up to where they really should be, then I really think we should do it. So I would support more of what the Director Deere was speaking.
So just so that we provide direction to staff, I will support, and I can live with a 5% rate increase. That's where I'm at. Where are you gentlemen? Director Gray, I don't know if you have an opinion at this time. Are you?
I'm still on the line. I'd like to hear what Director Deere and Director Williams, their perspective, but before I give mine. I did hear Director Williams. So what was their perspective? What rate increase was he supporting?
High as we can.
Well,
Where we are?
okay, whatever that means, but
Well,
let me-
100%.
hello,
Yeah.
hello, let me
That's
give you
just-
my perspective. I do want to hear what makes sense to the general manager, his recommendation, because, you know, we are board members, we do set policy, we do make this. Can you hold on just a minute, please?
You want to go ask him?
So, we're not gonna pay attention anyway.
We'll just keep going.
And does the staff have a number? What is it, 7.5, 10?
You'll recall that, and I don't know if we should continue the discussion with the board president, but what I would say is that at the conclusion of workshop 2, I recommended the 10%. And the reason for that, I do recognize that 15% is significant. It sounds high. When you do the math as far as the West Basin portion, and we have to understand that Metropolitan Water District's rate increase already is at 11.6%. That is significant, and I definitely don't want to diminish or speak to that and say it's nothing. But when you look at the difference between a 10% and the 5% as advocated, and this is why we actually included the 7.5, because of my original recommendation, and we do preview these presentations with the board president. He had mentioned the 5%, so we were looking at what would be in between. But when you look at a 10% on West Basin's portion, knowing that that's not the totality of it, that's roughly $4.06 per year per household. And so that would be the additional amount paid on average if everybody uses the same amount of water that they're currently utilizing. It's very simple to do. You look at the what the RSC would be at $303 at 10% versus the $289, which is the 5%. So you take that and then you divide that. Each acre foot is 3 households of 4. And so you could break it down per person, but if you just did each household, it's $4.06 or 60 cents per year. And the reason I'm making that recommendation, and again, I'm happy to repeat this, I have met with the board president. I understand his concern about debt, and I can only say that I am equally as concerned about the debt. But if we want to give ourselves a fighting chance to get through these next 2 years without utilizing that line of commercial paper, then I think having this additional revenue, and if we play our cards right when it comes to the future agreements, and you look at what potentially could happen as far as water demand goes, I think we will be in a good position to get through these next 2 years, get through these 2 crucial projects with some others, because it's not just those 2 projects, but the others as well, without having to utilize additional debt. And that maintains our debt coverage ratio that we're.
I'm sorry, this is
then-
Director Grant, I thought you were finished, EJ, go on.
Oh, no, and then it allows us to get through those 2 years above that 49 and 50, which is our ceiling. We don't want to get below that. So this gives us a little extra room, and that's the reason for my recommendation.
Mr. Chair, this is Director Graham back on the phone. Could I didn't hear all of what EJ said. What was your recommendation, EJ?
My recommendation was the 10%, but I did note that in my conversations with the board president, he mentioned that 5%. That is the reason why we added the 7.5 was because it was in between the 2.
That was a compromise, that we need that compromise, correct?
All right, so your recommendation is 7.5 or the 10%?
The 10.
Okay. Well,
I think we should
again,
do the 10.
I think the 10.
yeah, my recommendation is to support the general manager's recommendation.
The highest.
Desi's out of the room now, so we're kind of stalled. You need him?
Remember, you only one vote.
Well, it's also important to note that this is not teed up for an action item. We intend to bring this back. Nobody's locked into their positions here. This is just for dialogue and direction for staff.
Yes.
Hey.
Yeah. Where to go from here?
Well, if I gotta leave, if the board's preference is, I'm sorry, and I apologize, I missed the discussion for the last few minutes. But I understand that you guys prefer the 10% rate increase. Then the direction of staff would be that bring back a budget reflecting 10% rate increase. And so be it. We don't all have to have the same opinion. That's why we are a
true.
board. I will not support that. You will, and the staff needs to have a consensus or at least a majority recommendation. So if you guys can defend a 10% rate increase, that's the direction to set.
Okay.
Okay.
So he's leaving.
Well, and to his credit, there is a significant Metropolitan Water District meeting. I assume, I don't want to guess where you're moving to, but there is a significant meeting at Metropolitan Water District shortly. And we're happy to do that. If I could ask for direction, we did tentatively have a meeting on your calendars for the 7th.
Yes.
I don't know if that's needed, but we also have the F&A committee in June, and then we also have our full board meeting.
I would vote that you bring this back for one last meeting, and if it's on the 7th, that was next Friday, right? I think that most of us, as you had told us about it, reserved it on a calendar, but I'm speaking for my, under the assumption that most of us did. I'm okay with having a special meeting next Friday.
Me too.
And then what we'll do is we'll bring back those, I've heard 2 options, the 5 and the 10.
Mhm.
And what we'll do is we'll prepare a final budget for the department budgets and overall expenses. We'll continue to look at those because I've not yet met my goal, but we're very close to where I thought we could be. And we'll bring back those options.
Okay. We don't have a quorum. Oh, yes, we do.
We do have a
Gloria's still here. Oh, okay. All right. So this is, there's no other action items on this agenda, right? Okay, so what's next?
The next item is closed session. We do not have any closed session items. And then director's comments and future agenda item.
I would like for staff to look at our tax bill, property tax bill, and look at that tax bill and see how many items and percentage and maybe even the dollar amount that the taxpayer in our region pays for water issues. Not just talking about it, but water issues that water we use for our daily life. Can you do that?
I can, the majority of our service area is only going to have two. One for Metropolitan Water District, and then the standby charge for West Basin Municipal Water District.
What I'm asking you to do is look at all water uses we have, not only our drinking water, but one very important one is the wastewater, stormwater. All of the water issues that we have that shows how much money we're spending on water issues.
Happy to do that.
Anybody else? Well, then, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, we adjourn.
Director Williams, I apologize. It's my understanding that we did lose somebody recently, Mr. Frank Ephraim,
Yes,
and we did want to note that we would adjourn in his memory. So I don't
this is
know.
the 27th. When was that? Yesterday, yeah, okay. All right, that's fine.
Adjourn in his memory.
Frank Ephraim, thank you.
Who is he?
He was a longtime associate of mine. And he was a handyman's handyman.
Good.
Yes. All right.
Thank you, everyone.